Hey, everybody, welcome to another edition of Fixer Upper, the Marriage Project. We're glad that you're here. I'm glad for those that have stuck through so far, and I hope you continue to the end. And most of all, I pray that your heart is open for new things. Your heart is open for examination. Your heart is open to healing. Your heart is open to change, and you still have hope, that your heart be opened to hope. I said, I think it was last week, it's very difficult for people whose hearts have closed. And it's difficult for two reasons. Number one, no matter what their spouse does good, it never gets in because the heart is closed. And two, when the heart is closed, the hurt and the pain and disappointments that are on the inside stay locked on the inside. They can't get out. So it's imperative, it's necessary that you open your heart and take a little risk. You have to. If you want a miracle in your marriage, if you want things to change, you have to take a little bit of risk. I said a little bit of risk, okay? But it's necessary. It's important. You need to allow those seeds to go in. Remember, I shared a couple of weeks ago, Jesus told the parable of the sower, and some seed fell upon hard ground. And the fowls of the air just plucked that seed away. In other words, the seeds for change, the seeds for hope, the seeds for good, never were able to take root because the ground or the heart was hardened. And I know a lot of people have hardened hearts because we're talking about years of issues that have bothered you, years of aggravation, years of hurt, maybe even years of abuse. But we have to open our hearts a little bit to allow for opportunity for change to take place. And that's my prayer for you. Now, we've gone week after week after week, and so far we've been using the analogy of a garden and how a marriage is a garden. What you put into it is what you're going to get out of it. It's really that simple. And the first week that we spoke about, we said that we have to, before you plant anything in a garden, you have to go and dig up the old ground and take the stones out and some of the branches and twigs and stuff that get in the way. Because if you bring stones in with you, and we said that the analogy was this, things that are in our heart, things that we bring into the marriage are the number one reason why marriages fail. I'd said that 75% of marriages fail. 50% divorce, and the other 25%, they're just, dead marriages where they're going along. And I said the number one reason why is because we bring things into the marriage that are inside of us that doom our marriage to failure. They doom it. In other words, it has no chance. It's not if, it's when the destruction is going to come. And we have to be honest and courageous to search our hearts to find out what things that are in there, the attitudes, the bitterness, the hurt, the anger, the disappointments. I mean, these are things that we bring into a marriage, and none of them are healthy. They're all destructive to a marriage and many other things. And so therefore, we have to be honest. And if you remember, our key verse on our first week was, God desires truth on the inward part. And we have to be honest on the inside. And I said this the second week. I said, if you want to look in a mirror and find out the things that are on the inside of you that aren't healthy for your marriage, I said the best mirror in your house is your spouse. Ask them, because I guarantee you, they'll have a lot to say about the things that are on the inside of you. And right away, a lot of people shut down. Well, I'm not going to ask her. I'm not going to ask him. Well, why not? If they're supposed to be your partner, if they're supposed to be your teammate, if you're in this together, you need to ask them. They know better than you what's going on the inside of you, because sometimes we're blind to things. So if we don't get those issues that are on the inside of us out of us, our marriage has no hope. Then the second week, we talked about now it's time to plant seeds. The third week, I'm not going to go over everything, of course, because that's why you can just go online and watch them all. And then the third week, we talked about, well, those seeds then need to be watered. And now this week, I want to talk about probably the most tedious aspect of a garden is you got to maintain that garden. It's real exciting to say I do. It's exciting, at least for a wife, to plan a wedding and to plan the reception, to plan the honeymoon. That's all exciting things. That's the easy part. But then comes maintaining the relationship, just like a garden. It's exciting to start to see things grow in that garden, but then you have to maintain it. And if you don't maintain it, the garden can get destroyed. Now, there's two different aspects of maintaining a garden I want to talk about, two different categories. Category number one is going to be that we have to weed out things that get in there. How many of us ever planted a garden before you got so tired of maintaining it, you just quit? And you go out there and there's weeds everywhere. The weeds are growing like crazy and they're destroying the beauty of that garden and they're destroying the fruits of all your labor. So if you don't maintain, and I'm going to read our key verse on this in just a second, it's going to fall apart. And the second aspect of maintaining a garden is sometimes you got to spray the garden. Sometimes you have to add nutrients, such as Miracle-Gro or something like that, to the soil, because not all soil is the same. Did you know that? Did you know that some soils, certain things will grow, other soils, other things won't grow in there? So sometimes you have to add nutrients to that soil as part of the maintenance program to get it to grow. So the weeding part is one, adding things, nutrients is the second one that I want to talk about, okay? So what are the things that we need to do? Well, first, let me read. I'm in Matthew chapter 13. There's actually two very interesting portions of Scripture that you would think have nothing to do with marriage, but they have everything to do with marriage. Matthew chapter 13, here's our key verse portion. I'm going to start in verse 24. And Jesus spoke another parable and said, "For the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man which sowed good seed in his field." I have no doubts that when you got married, you sowed good seed. You made those vows, which were those seeds. You had good intentions. It was all good when you first started, all right? He said, but, in verse 25, but while his men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares or weeds amongst the wheat, and then went their way. And when the blade or the grass grew up, or the wheat grew up, and brought forth fruit, that appeared the tares also. So the servants of the householder came and said unto him, "Sir, didn't we sow good seed in the field? Then why are there weeds in it?" Now notice that. This is a powerful verse about marriage right now. Didn't we say good things? Didn't we have good vows? Didn't we start off good? Didn't we have good intentions? Absolutely you did. They said, but then how do these weeds get there? Where do they come from? Well, you know what happens? Life happens. And if you were to just take any ground that has been plowed and do absolutely nothing to it, nothing, you went back there a couple weeks later, you know what you would find? A big patch of weeds. Because the seeds of weeds are floating in the air all around us, and they will get into that garden. It's just called the nature of life. You have to be prepared for things to come. Now I'm going to give you a second portion of Scripture. John chapter 13, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. It's amazing how Jesus touched on this. John 13, and it's a whole different subject, but you're going to understand in just a second. Now here's the famous portion of Scripture where Jesus decides to wash his disciples' feet. And Peter, who would oftentimes stick his foot in his mouth, notice this little exchange between Jesus and Peter, okay? John chapter 13, I'll start with verse 9. It says, "And Simon Peter said unto him, Lord, don't just wash my feet only, but my hands and my head." In other words, if you're going to wash my feet, wash all of me, Lord. And notice what Jesus said in verse 10. He said, Jesus said unto him, "He that is washed already needs not to wash again, except to have his feet washed." Now, why would he say that? Why would he say your feet need to be washed? It's the exact same thing. Because what do the feet represent? The feet represent our walk through life. And he's saying, because you come to me and you've given your heart to me, you've been washed, you've been cleansed, all your sins are washed away, you've been purified, you've been made brand new, but you still walk every single day in this filthy earth. Every day you have to walk in this earth, and when you come home, guess what you're bringing in the house with you? The dirt from this world, the junk from this world. It's on your feet, symbolically speaking. And realistically, back in the day, because they wore sandals, and they weren't walking on paved roads, they were walking on mud, they were walking on dirt, they were walking right next to cattle and horses and donkeys who were going to the bathroom on the ground right next to them. Who knows what junk was on the bottom of their feet? And they all brought it into the house with them. So Jesus said, you need to wash your feet as a daily maintenance. In other words, life gets on the inside of you. Life can affect you. Life could tarnish you. Life could spoil you. So every single day, you have to, quote, wash your feet. What does that mean? Do maintenance every single day. That's how you keep yourself clean. So it's the exact same thing that we're talking about. Because in this walk in life, when you deal with children, when you deal in the workplace, when you deal with customers, when you have to deal with the government, man, they'll aggravate the heck out of you, won't they? They'll drive you crazy. Well, what do? That stuff doesn't just go away. That stuff gets on the inside of you every single day. So Jesus was saying, basically, to guard your heart, you have to do daily maintenance. So it is with a marriage. We start out sowing good seed, but somehow along the way, it seems like somebody sowed weeds in our garden. Somebody sowed ugly stuff in our garden. How did that get there? And we're surprised how that got there, because oftentimes we had nothing to do with it. Listen, oftentimes the things we say and the things we do are responses to junk that got on the inside of us throughout the day. In other words, that anger, that frustration from work, which I'm going to mention in just a moment, was on the inside of us. That's what caused us to lash out when we got home. So in other words, our actions are often reactions to things that took place at work or things that took place, at school or something like that. So understand that. So let's talk about how we pull those weeds out, how we pull that junk out of our lives, because that junk will ruin our garden, will ruin our fruits, will ruin our marriage, will ruin our relationship, okay? Number one, without a doubt, the first thing we need to do is walk in forgiveness. This is necessary. It's important. You have to forgive one another. If you don't forgive, as I said just moments ago, your heart, your spirit will close up and you become hard as a rock. And then nothing will ever change. No goodness will come in and none of the hurt will ever come out. Forgiveness is necessary. And we should walk in it every single day, because none of us are perfect. We all make mistakes. We all blow it. Forgiveness is going in and plucking the root of that weed right out. Now, how many of us have ever actually weeded before? See, I grew up before they had things such as weed killer and grow wrong or whatever it is that you spray on your weeds. In other words, I used to have to get down on my hands and knees with this little evil tool, a weeder, and go in and pull these things out. And you know what you discover? The quicker you get to the weed, the sooner you get to it, the easier it is to pull right out. Boom, comes right out. But you let it stay there a while, what happens? The roots start to grow. And they grow deep. And they become firm, and it's harder to get that out. So you have to learn how to walk in forgiveness. You have to. You can't hold things on the inside of you, because those things are poison that you hold on the inside of you, okay? Now, Jesus said this, just to give you a comparison. Jesus said, if you don't forgive one another, I can't forgive you. Because remember, you may sin against each other, but you sin against me every day. And if you want me to forgive you, you got to forgive one another. So forgiveness is the foundation for healing a relationship. Forgiveness, okay? Number one. Well, the opposite side of that, we're going to put down over here, is saying the words, I'm sorry. Those are powerful words. There are spouses who have never heard these words come out of the mouth of their spouse. There are husbands who have never said, I'm sorry, because they've never been wrong, or they couldn't admit they were wrong. There are wives who could not spell the phrase, I'm sorry, on a test, because it's a foreign phrase to them. And I'm totally serious when I say that. Because the words I'm sorry mean I'm taking responsibility for my behavior or for my actions. But going back to week one, if we're too immature, if we're too insecure, then we can't say these words. But if you want somebody to walk in forgiveness, a great way to start is by saying, I'm sorry. I blew it. Now, can we be honest a little bit right now? The words I'm sorry are powerful words. But if you keep saying I'm sorry for the exact same thing over and over and over again, guess what? The words lose their power. Because it only shows one thing. You don't really mean it. If you meant it, you wouldn't be doing it anymore. So the fact that you keep saying I'm sorry to the exact same thing means you're just a phony. Which goes back to what I said last week and a couple weeks before that. Be a man or a woman of integrity. If you say you're sorry, that means what you're saying is I shouldn't be doing that. I was wrong for doing that, so don't do it anymore. But if you keep doing it, your spouse is going to lose respect for you. They're going to lose trust in you. So, of course, these two go together, and they're both powerful ways to restart your garden. Because you know what? There are some people that are watching this right now. You don't need to weed your garden. You need to take a bulldozer and come in and just bulldoze the entire garden. We need to get everything, and that's okay. That's fine. I recommend that. Bulldoze everything. And let's just say, you know what, honey? Let's start from square one. You blew it, I blew it, we blew it together. Let's just forgive each other, apologize, and let's just start fresh. And take that bulldozer and say, let's just get everything out of the way. Let's start fresh. I recommend you do that if things are really that bad. But that's important, okay? Now, another word I'm going to put on here is the word patience. As people are, first of all, people aren't perfect. And neither are you. Never forget that. None of us are perfect. And we need to be patient with each other. And now, this kind of goes along with a little bit, there are more than one philosophies on how to handle things in life. What do I mean by that? Your way isn't the only way or always the right way. Sometimes your partner has their own way of wanting to do something. And to the best of your ability, let them do it their way, if that's what they feel comfortable with. But my way's better. Says who? You? Who died and made you king? So be patient, especially if somebody's trying to overcome something in their life. If somebody's been acting a certain way, if somebody had things poured into them from their childhood, they're not going to change like this. It's impossible for that to happen. So be patient with people. A great problem in marriage, man, people are so impatient. I've been with people before, they are so quick to pull out the gun and pull the trigger and blow their spouse away that it's amazing. Like, whoa, slow down. Slow down. Don't be so quick to shoot one another down. Be patient. There's a reason why they say in the world, patience is a virtue. Because it really, really is true. Along this line, we're going to talk about this more in the future, because I'm really tying all these together right now. You need to discuss issues. That's important. Now, as you heard me say the first couple of weeks, I kind of asked the question, what is the maturity level of your relationship, of your marriage? You may be 40 years old, but your marriage may be like two 13-year-olds because of the way you treat each other. The single best way to determine your maturity level of your relationship is your ability to discuss issues. Can you talk about them like you're adults? Can you talk about them without getting offended within 1.3 seconds? Can you talk about them without getting hurt right away? How dare you say that? Well, it's true. That's how I feel. You need to be able to get to discuss the things that hurt you, the things that offend you, the things that bother you, and you need to learn how to do that in a mature way. Now, there have been many times when I've been counseling couples that I've said to them, I forbid you to have any conversations about anything that's problematic in your relationship without me there. Now, why would I say that? Because I'm on a power kick? No. You think I want to be in the middle of those conversations? That's the last thing on the face of the earth that I want. It's just that I know that that couple is incapable of having a conversation about a sensitive issue without it turning into a major brawl. It's impossible. I know that. So therefore, having a third party there to keep things in line, in order, goes a long, 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 long way. I've told couples that were in their 40s that you should be ashamed right now that I have to treat you like children and say I forbid you to have a conversation about this without me being there. Because I want them to see how childish they're acting. They need to have their eyes opened. I mean, we're talking people on the verge of divorce, on the verge of throwing everything away, on the verge of blowing up a whole family with kids involved. So I'm not playing any games. I'm not pulling any punches over here. But it is vital because you know what happens almost all the time? I'll tell you what happens all the time. I know because I've been in the middle of it 1,000 times. She does something. I'm just picking randomly. It goes both ways. She does something and it bothers him. This is not the first time. It's not the 100th time. And so what does he do? I don't want to get involved. I don't want to talk about it. Because it's just going to annoy me. It's just going to annoy her. It's going to turn into a fight. So forget about it. And then he keeps it in. Then a couple days later, she does it again. And he keeps it in, but now his teeth are grinding. He can't hold it anymore. And now she does something else trivial. But he is so filled up to here with frustration and anger that he explodes and she goes, see, there you go again with your anger. See, you have an anger problem. But he never discussed with her this thing that you're doing that bothers me. They were not able to discuss it on a mature level. And sometimes it's going to take a third party to come in to referee, but also to help teach skills. Because I'll tell you what people do all the time. They just deflect, and they blame the other person. They never get down to addressing the actual issue because, again, people get offended, people get hurt, people don't want to be honest with themselves. They don't want that, which is why then the cycle just goes on and on and on and on and on. If you want real forgiveness and real I'm sorry, you need to be patient and learn how to discuss issues. So key. This is part of the maintenance program of weeding out the garden. Because if something comes up and you don't deal with it, that weed just grows and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And before you know it, now you want to deal with it, but it's like a small tree on the inside and you can't get rid of it because it's sunk so deep into the heart of the person, okay? Very, very important, all right? Next, keep the outside outside. Now, mothers know what this is like. What do you mean? Your kid is outside playing, rolling in the mud. They're dirty everywhere. And they don't even think twice. They just want to sprint right into the house, and you just clean the floors. You just vacuum the rug, and they want to run right in the house, and they're going to make the house filthy. So what do? You scream, stop! Take those clothes off right there. You're not bringing that outside to the inside of this house. And I got no problem with that. You work hard cleaning that house. And you don't want to bring the outside junk or the outside garbage on the inside. There's nothing wrong with that. But we as adults often do the exact same thing. The problem is, most of the time the dirt isn't on the outside. The dirt's on the inside. I've given the analogy many times. My previous job before I went into the ministry, I used to work at a laboratory in town, in Nutley, where we lived, and we worked with a lot of chemicals. I worked with a lot of chemicals. That explains a lot. I breathed in too many fumes, too many chemicals over the years. And I could remember walking in, the first day I walked in there, there's a little ante room outside, like a little meeting area. And when I wasn't even in the lab yet. As soon as I opened the door, the stench was so powerful that it just stopped me dead in my tracks. It was that powerful. And when I started working there, I would come home, and we lived in an apartment building. My wife would stop at the door and say, "You're not coming in the house with those clothes on. Take them off right here." Now, mind you, did I mention I'm in a hallway outside with other apartments all around? She didn't care. She didn't care. Now, you want to know the crazy thing? The crazy thing is, after a little while, I didn't notice the stench anymore. I had gotten used to it. But everybody else I came in contact with, guess what? They all noticed it. So it is with the stuff on the inside of us. So it is with the stench in our marriage, the stench in our lives, the stench in us. That hurt, that anger, that bitterness, that disappointment, that frustration, whatever. It's like a stench, and we get so used to it that we forget it's there. We don't realize it's there. But guess what? Your kids notice it. Your kids smell it. Guarantee it. Your friends and neighbors, they smell it because they hear the attitude. They see what's going on. Well, as we work, as I said this earlier, as we do things throughout life, we get aggravated. We get frustrated. We get hurt. We get offended. We get disappointed. And we often march right into our house as though our shoes are filled with mud, and we're bringing all that hurt, that frustration, that aggravation into our house, and we're bringing it right into our marriage, right into our relationship with the kids. Because now I come home, I'm so frustrated because my boss drives me crazy, and that may be 100% true. Maybe 100% true. Except for Ro, our church secretary. She's got a wonderful boss. I promise you that. But it's easy to get frustrated, and it's easy to take that frustration home with you. It's easy to take that aggravation home with you. It's hard to turn it off. But you have to learn how to do so. You have to learn that when you walk in, don't bring the outside in with you. Keep the outside outside. Keep the frustrations, the aggravations, the hurt, the anger, because all of a sudden, you're short-tempered for no reason whatsoever. And all your child did was ask you for help, and you blew up. Go do it yourself. I need some rest. Don't you know I worked all day? Now, a sign that there's issues on the inside that you're dealing with is overreactions. I talked about this, I think, a couple of weeks ago, but it's worth you bringing up again. When you overreact to something. Now, I said this, but again, I want to say this again too. When I counsel people, the first thing I try to do is to see if it's a legitimate hurt or anger or frustration that person has that they bring to the table. Is it legit? Because sometimes it's not. Sometimes he did absolutely nothing wrong. She did absolutely nothing wrong. The other person is taking it completely out of context. But if it is okay, if it is legitimate, then I need to determine on a scale of 1 to 10, the Pastor Tom scale, how bad was this issue? Because you know what happens all the time? It's a 2 or a 3, but somebody's acting like it's a 9 or a 10. They're overreacting to it. And you need to back that down. And I tell people, Your anger, your frustration, your hurt is legitimate. What he did certainly is worthy of you being a little upset over. However, it's certainly not worth the start of World War III. It's only a 2 or a 3 on a scale of 1 to 10, but you're acting like a 10, 11, 12. You have to back it down and keep things in perspective. You know, this world that we live in today has got no perspective anymore. There's none whatsoever. Our poor kids are getting taught things in the school with no perspective. I'll give you an example. You would think, by the way teachers are teaching, that the United States of America invented slavery. And we were the only country in the world that had slaves in the 1700s and 1800s. And so therefore, we're evil. That is the most ridiculous teaching that's out there. Of course, slavery was evil. It's been evil for 10,000 years. There's no question about that. But you got to teach it with perspective. Every country had slavery. Every one. African countries had slaves. Keep it in perspective. There were white slaves in America, like over 1 million white slaves in America. But none of that is taught. And the reason why none of that is taught is because the people who are teaching have an agenda. Well, oftentimes in an argument, check out what I'm about to say right now, unfortunately there's an agenda. And the agenda is usually based upon one of two things. I want to prove that I'm right, so therefore I will twist the truth a little bit, or I want to get something out of it. I want something, so I will also twist the truth. Unhealthy. Keep things in perspective when you talk about them. I've had conversations with people over the years. There are some people who their relationships are like a house of cards. And, you know, did you ever make that little triangle with cards? Then you put a card on top and you try to build that pyramid? Well, some people, their relationship is like that. And you know, when you finally get to the top, a card falls, what usually happens? The whole thing falls down. Well, there are some people, their relationship is so insecure and so immature that all it takes is one thing to happen and everything falls apart. It's over, it's done, forget it. Call the doctor, call the lawyer, call the police, it's over. Like, whoa, why are you overreacting so much? That's not healthy, that's not true. It was one issue, let's deal with it. But because people are so immature and so insecure or so hurt on the inside, they destroy the whole thing. Not good, and that's why oftentimes you need to have that third person in there to help bring perspective to a relationship. So, when you come from the outside, keep the outside outside. Try to keep your home pure. You know, I deal with people's problems almost every day. And I'm honored to be able to help people, work with people, pray with people. But it's very easy for a pastor to bring the frustrations of the people he's dealing with home with him and then take it out on his wife or take it out on his kids. And that's not healthy, that's not fair. They don't deserve that. And over the years, I've had to learn to take my dirty shoes off outside and walk in. So, these are just some examples of how to weed your garden, because weeds will get in. You understand that. Issues will happen. Life happens. And now, oftentimes, you did absolutely nothing intentional to cause any of these issues to happen. They happened to you. They were done to you. It was that person who cut you off. It was that person who hit you from behind because they weren't paying attention. You did nothing wrong. You were obeying the law. You were paying attention. They just rammed you from behind. You did nothing wrong. But what happened? You were so frustrated, so aggravated by it, you came home and you took it out on everybody at home. And you justified it. Well, because my car was hit, and I lost a day of work. I lost this, and now I got to rent a car. All junky things. No excuse to take it out on anybody at home. None. They didn't have anything to do with it. So because you're a victim, now you want to make your family victims. Somehow that makes it okay? That doesn't make it okay. Stop it right there. Learn how to keep the outside outside. Okay? Gotcha? Okay. Now, let's go to the other side of the coin over here. things that we could do to nurture and nourish and add nourishment to the soil of our garden as part of our daily maintenance program to help it grow, okay? Let's go up here, support. What do you mean by that? Let me explain. When you plant a garden and the garden begins to grow, it changes. And therefore, changes need to be made to keep up with the changes of your garden. What do you mean by that? We'll just use an example. If you've ever grown tomatoes before, you know you start out usually in a little tiny thing, and you plant it, and it stays there by itself. Well, if that tomato plant is growing healthy and growing strong, you know what's going to start happening to that tomato plant? It's going to start tipping over. And you don't want the tomatoes growing on the ground, because guess what's on the ground waiting for those tomatoes? Bugs. There's bugs there on the ground. You got to be prepared for those bugs. So what do? You go out and you go to a store and you buy steaks. Not for the grill, not those kind of steaks. Wooden steaks, not for vampires, not for your spouse. These are steaks that you drive into the ground next to the tomato plant, and then you tie the tomato plant to the stake. I've done it. Millions of other people have done it over the years. What does that do? That allows the plant to grow higher, stronger, healthier, and allows the fruits, the tomatoes in this case, to stay strong and be healthy and not get destroyed. If you grow cucumbers, you can let the cucumbers stay on the ground because they'll grow on the ground, or what a lot of people do is they will put some stakes in the ground and put some like chicken wire fencing, and the cucumbers climb up and they grow on that fence. You know why strawberries are called strawberries? Because they take straw, or hay, but straw, and they put it underneath the plant to give it support and to raise it off the ground a little bit. Why? Because the bugs in the ground will eat and destroy the strawberries. So that's why they're called strawberries. In other words, as that garden grows, it needs extra support. As a marriage grows, as a family grows, it will oftentimes need extra support. It needs more support 5 years, 7 years later than it did 5 or 7 years earlier. In other words, you got to up your game because things have changed. Well, what's changed? Well, the most obvious, of course, is when you first got married, most of the time you didn't have any kids. So therefore, you didn't have that responsibility. Well, let's just say 10 years later, now you got 3 kids. That changes everything completely. And guess what? The wife needs a whole lot more support. A whole lot more than what you were giving her when you first got married. She could use help all around the house, help with the kids, help with diapers, because she's exhausted raising kids. But men, if you don't increase the support, then the plant of your wife is going to fall on the ground, and those fruits are just going to start getting eaten, and they're going to get spoiled, and they're going to die. Well, ladies, on the other side of the coin, your husband may be working harder now than he ever has before in his life because now he's got a second job. Or maybe he's gotten promoted in his job, and now he's working, all these extra, now he went from working 40 hours to 50 to 60 hours a week. And he needs a little bit more of your support too. Well, he doesn't know about that. Well, I kids, how many diapers? Do not turn it into a contest of who works harder than the other. How many of us remember the movie Jaws from years ago? And they were out on the boat at the end, and they were starting to have too many drinks, and they started comparing their scars. Well, I was bitten by a great white shark. I got these 22. I lost my leg. They're trying to outdo each other. And oftentimes, that's what couples try to do. They try to outdo each other to get a better sympathy vote. That's not what it's about. Remember what I said last week and the week before? It's about how can I spoil my partner? So you need to up your game. Husbands, up your game as the plant and as the family grows more and more. You need to know that before you start a family. The minute you start a family, you need to know what to expect. The minute you planted a garden, don't be, it's like buying a dog and saying, that dog barks. What, are you surprised? Did you think you were buying a chicken? Well, that dog went to the bathroom on my floor. Oh, you mean it didn't come with a diaper? You didn't know that going in? That dog chewed the furniture. You didn't know dogs had teeth? In other words, you need to know what you're getting yourself into and the responsibilities that go along with it. And you got to up your game. You got to take more responsibility, or you got to bring more support to the house and more support to your spouse. Hey, that rhymes, doesn't it? Write that down somewhere. It's necessary. Because sometimes we max out at how much effort we're willing to give. And then we just stop right there. And we quit. We draw a line. There are no lines. You give what has to be given to make things work better and work well. Important. Next big word. Prioritizing. What do you mean? Well, I'm probably going to offend a bunch of mothers right now, but I don't care. I'm here to tell the truth. Marriage is about priorities, prioritizing things. And this is part of the maintenance program for your marriage. Now, what is the number one thing that parents can do for their children as they're growing up? It's got nothing to do with sports. It's got nothing to do with toys. It's got nothing to do with an iPhone. It's got nothing to do with, an Apple Watch. It's got nothing to do with any of those things. The number one thing, without a doubt, not even close, is you can provide a stable, happy environment for your children. They need that more than anything else. Listen to what I'm about to say. Stable households produce stable children as a whole. Unstable households produce unstable, insecure, anger, fearful children. That's how it works. Your children need to grow up in an environment where they see mom and dad together, united, loving each other, supporting each other, there for each other. That's the number one thing. They don't need, that built-in pool. They don't need that. They don't need that $65,000 Tahoe. They'll be fine with just a regular, minivan. They don't need that. They need stability in their lives. Now, why do I bring that up? I bring that up because that means you need to prioritize your marriage as the priority in that house. Now, what do I mean by that? Right away, mothers are acting like, you just said I'm supposed to abandon my kids and never feed them or never I never said anything like that. Stop overreacting. I didn't say anything like that at all. What I'm saying is, because what happens all the time, women, as households grow, they detach from their husband and they overattach to their children. And they give all of their priority, all of their time to their children and very little time to their husband/marriage. And then they wonder why the marriage starts to fail. What do husbands do? They give all of their time to their work, to their hobbies, to their job, and give very little time to their wife or their marriage. And they wonder why the marriage is failing. You need to prioritize your marriage. Again, I'm not saying you neglect your children. What I am saying is your children should not be running your life and running your household. This is a terrible trend that's taken place in our society over the last 20 years. Terrible. I'm a terrible mother if I don't do everything I can for my kids. Says who? Well, you know, in our school system, I don't care what your school system does. Remember, you need to prioritize your marriage. Because guess what's going to happen when your kids turn 18, 19, 20? Bye, I'm out of the house. And you know who's left together? That husband and wife who haven't done anything for each other for the last 15 years. And they got a stinky marriage. Well, you reap what you sow. Remember, your marriage is that garden. So you have to prioritize what's most important. And your marriage is most important in your household. Your spouse is the most important. Again, I can hear mothers cringing on the inside as though I'm saying, lock your kid in the basement or something like that. I'm not saying that. I understand we have to make many sacrifices for our children, but not at the expense of our marriage and not at the expense of our spouse. Our kids need to know. My kids knew that my wife was my top priority. She's the great love of my life. I love my kids more than any parent on the face of the earth. I do. But my wife came first. If my son was giving my wife a hard time, and he did often when he was young, all my wife had to do was say, I'm calling your father. And that was it. Because he knew I would take him, lift him up, and pin him against the wall and say, who were you talking to? That's your mother. I didn't take his side over my wife. And my wife didn't take their side over me. We had a strong, united front. And that's why we have a great marriage today. So priorities are important. You need to maintain your marriage. And it's harder to do when there's more bills to pay and when there's more feet running around the house. I know that. I had extra feet running the house. We had 8 extra feet running the house. 2 kids and a dog. Count them, they come to 8. And each one of those was more work, but that does not mean I had to up my game. We had to up our game. We didn't neglect one area to help another area. No, we had to lift it up, and we could do that. Now, along the line of how to feed and nurture your relationship, your marriage, intimacy. Right now, all the husbands watching just sat up on the couch. This is supremely important in a relationship. Supremely important. What makes the two one is intimacy. Do not let that fade away and die in your relationship. And it happens all the time. Trust me, I counsel all the time. And that causes number one problems with marriage right here. Numero uno. Did I mention that? Why does that happen? Well, because all my attention and love and affection are towards my kids. All my attention is towards my job and my kid's sports, my kid this, my kid this, my kid this. We become Uber drivers in today's society today. Oh, my kid has 4 different games in 4 different sports today. That's just one kid. Like, your kid's doing too much. Oh, but they want to. I don't care if they want to. So what if they want to? You don't have to give them everything they want. When do you have time for your spouse? This is not optional. And I understand we go through times when, your wife just had a baby. She's going to be exhausted. Her body was beaten up. I understand. I do. But you need to guard this. Because when you guard this, you guard your marriage. If you lose this, you will lose your marriage. Or you may stay together, but now you have a dead, cold marriage, which isn't really a marriage at all. Okay? Don't worry, ladies. I'm nothing if not very, very fair. Outside of this, hold hands, cuddle. What was the third one put down over here? Why am I asking you? And hugs. In other words, touching. In a non-intimate way. Very important. Because this shows I care about you. This doesn't necessarily show that. You know what this shows more often? I care about me. But this shows I care about you. Touch is important. Hold hands. Sit next to each other. And for my wife and I, this is built in. Because my wife is cold 365 nights a year. So when we go to bed at night, she's on top of me because I exist for one purpose, and that's to provide warmth for her. And I'm glad and honored to be able to do so until she falls asleep on top of me. And then I got to push her off a little bit. But cuddling, I'm telling you, this shows you care. This shows more love oftentimes than this. When you walk outside, hold hands. Interlock arms. Do stuff like that. Super important because it means a lot, especially to a wife. It means a lot. One of my favorite things I tell almost all couples when I'm counseling before a marriage: date till you die. Never stop dating. Why would you want to? It was that dating process that made you fall in love. Hopefully it was a dating process. Mike and Jackie, stop showing off right now. Let go of your hands right now, okay? It's always show-offs in the crowd over here. The reason why you fell in love and got married is because you dated. And hopefully dating was fun, exciting. Well, why stop dating? Well, because we're married. So? Why stop dating? Why stop doing the very thing that caused you to fall in love? That was so much fun. That was so spontaneous. Now, I understand as kids and responsibilities get involved, it makes it more difficult. But don't stop. That's why I use the phrase, date till you die. Go for a ride. Go for a walk. I don't care what your budget is. If you can't find a few dollars to have ice cream once a week or once every other week, then there's other serious problems that you got going on right now, finances, which we'll talk about in a couple of weeks. Sit down and watch a show together with your arm around each other. Do a puzzle together. My wife all of a sudden is addicted with puzzles. There's puzzles all over my house right now. And I hate puzzles. Play a game together. Read a book together. Pray together. Do things together. Date till you die. You know, one of the things that my wife and I like to do when our kids were growing up, and we still do, but we like to do when they were younger, is we would like to create what we called family moments. For example, if it was during the summer or the kids had a week off or something like that, we'd say, okay, we're going for cheesesteaks. Hop in the car, that was our cue. We were going down the shore for cheesesteaks. And we drive all the way down the shore, and it would take, an hour and a half to get down there? We'd spend another hour and a half, 2 hours tops on the boardwalk. having cheesesteaks, playing some games, a couple rides, hop in the car. We're back home before it's too late, and we had a family moment, and we had a blast. Or it could be just my wife and I to go ahead and do that. Do something like that. It takes sometimes a little thought. It takes sometimes a little planning. It takes that, but that's okay. Put effort into it. If you care about it, put effort into it. But these are things that add nutrients into your relationship, into your marriage. And I promise you, they're very, very powerful things. Along this line, surprises. Surprise, hon, I just bought a $2,000 drum set. Those are not the kind of surprises I'm talking about. Okay? But surprise her, surprise him with something that is just a little out of the ordinary. You know, if he has a favorite meal that you don't get to eat that often, surprise him and make that meal for him. If after dinner you don't normally wash the dishes, husbands, your wife gets up to check on the kids or go to the bathroom, get up and wash the dishes. Now, that's going to cause your wife to pass out and, be taken to the hospital or something like that because it's too great of a surprise that you might want to work your way into that slowly. Or volunteer to do the wash, or I'll vacuum, or I'll clean this, or I'll do this with you. I'll go to a ball, I'll sit down and watch a football game with you, and I'll make your special snacks to eat together. Little tiny surprises. One of the things I've never forgotten that was said in this church, I think it was testimonies or something, and we have Rich and Sandy. Many of us know Rich and Sandy, and God has blessed them, and they're successful in their business, they're successful in life. And she one time, for those who don't remember, she said, one of the greatest gifts that Richard ever got me was malted milk balls. You're like, excuse me? Say that again? Malted milk balls. Now, she's gotten pretty jewelry on vacations and stuff like that, which are all nice, but she said the malted milk balls meant more to her than anything else because, well, she would eat those when they were dating, when they were young, and she hadn't had them in years. And Rich went out of his way to get those malted milk balls because he thought of her, and it meant a lot to her. Now, there's a surprise that didn't cost a lot of money, but it meant a lot to her. It touched her. And it touched me that she gave that testimony of something so simple. So do little things that are positive surprises. And I don't mean once a year. Once in a while, surprise your spouse. Let them know you think about them. Let them know you care about them. Because there's really nothing worse than your spouse feeling as though you take them for granted. Let's see. Almost done. Compliments, encouragement. Say nice things. Remember, life and death in the power of the tongue, right? Speak encouraging things. Speak nice things to them. And on the other side of the coin, don't speak death. Don't speak horrible things. Don't ever say things like divorce, I hate. Never say those things. But speak encouraging things to each other. Very, very important. And last one we're going to touch on today. Major on the majors. I should have put this one over here. I forgot that. I skipped past that. What do you mean major on the majors? Don't get caught up in the habit, because this becomes a habit in couples. Any little thing that goes wrong quickly spirals into a major thing. When I counsel people who want a divorce, and I'll inevitably ask, well, what happened that brought you to this point? You'd be amazed at how often either A, we don't remember, or B, it was some stupid, tiny little thing that spiraled out of control, and that molehill became a mountain, and great destruction came as a result of it. Major on the majors. Don't get caught up on little things. The Bible says this, it says, it's the little foxes that spoil the vines. And that is so true of relationships. It's so often the little things that we have harsh reactions to, that we get so quickly offended over, so mad over, and they start adding up and piling up on top of each other, and it becomes a mountain, and it causes destruction. Learn how to let the little things slide by. They're not that important. They're really not. The things that, and I've said this, in church many times, the things that are most important to me, they have narrowed in my life as I've gotten older. Now I'm down to my walk with God, my family, and my church. Those are the only things in life that are majors for me. Pastor, you didn't mention your health. Yeah, well, look at me. Obviously, that's not a major in my life right now. Because that's not nearly as important as those first three things that I said. Not even close. Because when you get older, you start getting wisdom, and you start realizing, why did I make such a stink over that? Why did we fight over that? Who cares? Why do we say such harsh things over something so trivial, something so unimportant? So take the wisdom of somebody who's been married 35 and a half years now, all to the same person. That's pretty amazing. And I'm only, 47, 48 or something like that. Don't major on minors. That is something that causes so many problems with so many people. And like I said, and I'm going to close with this, I've noticed it becomes a habit and a pattern in marriages and in relationships. Once we start doing it, we do it all the time. And that becomes a very unhealthy thing to do. So, practice forgiveness on a regular basis. Say, I'm sorry. Take responsibility for your actions. Be patient with another. Have the maturity to discuss issues before they grow on the inside of your partner. Keep the outside problems on the outside. Major on the majors, not the minors. And then as far as the nourishment goes, you need extra support as the marriage and the family grows. Prioritize your marriage as the priority in your household. Intimacy is not optional, it's important. Hold hands, cuddle, have hugs, touch one another to show you care and you love. Date till you die, baby. It's fun. Why wouldn't you want to do it? Have little surprises for each other. I don't mean pranks or like crazy things. I mean little surprises, fun surprises. Compliment, encourage each other. And if you do this, you maintain the marriage and you will reap good fruits from it. All right, everybody? Thank you very much. Those that are watching at home, thank you very much for joining us. And we're going to see you here next week. As next week we talk about, in every good garden needs to have a fence around it to stop the critters from coming in. We're going to talk about that fence next week, okay? God bless. See you all soon.